Welcome into the expansive world of cis society, a space where taboos dissolve, shadows become allies, and sensuality, intimacy, and sexuality are celebrated as gateways to truth. This is Taboo Talks, a podcast where no topic is off limits, and everything is held with courage, compassion, and curiosity. Together, let's shatter the limits of what we've been taught to fear and transform it into the power to live fully, freely, and authentically.
So welcome back as we continue this really interesting, innovative conversation around the intersection of AI and love and relationships. And this week we are so excited. We have an amazing, incredible guest. Her name is Natalie MacNeil, and she is an Emmy Award-winning media entrepreneur, futurist, seer, and ICF-credentialed business and leadership coach. She specializes in guiding visionaries and entrepreneurs to harness AI for building successful businesses while integrating intuitive foresight, practical strategies, and her transformational embodiment method. And over the past 15 years, she's helped over 1 million people become embodied leaders, create their dream future, and really build extraordinary businesses that make a lasting impact. And I actually first discovered her as she was on Layla Martin's podcast, This Tantric Life, and I'm one of Layla's Vita coaching students this year. So I've been working really in depth with all of her practices. And Heather and I had just chosen this topic of AI and love as our taboo topic. And then I saw that Layla had this topic on her show with Natalie talking about pleasure tech and sex robots and all of these things that have been on our minds too. So I knew, I was like, I want her on our show. She has such amazing golden nuggets to share and really intersects these worlds of technology and the transpersonal. So without further ado, Natalie, welcome onto our show. I can't wait to dive in with you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, we're so excited that you're here. Yeah, I feel really curious about you and your life and what led you to embrace your sexuality and ultimately AI more deeply. It's such an interesting merging. So like, who are you and what brought you to that connection?
I feel like that would be an hours long story potentially, but I grew up having visions. Like as a child, I had some interesting life experiences, some health challenges as a kid, spent a little bit of time in hospital. And during those times, I feel like I touched a very deep meditative state at a very young age. And I think children can naturally drop into those states pretty easily. I think children are able to move beyond the veils. And I just always felt very protected in those spaces, very guided, and I would have these visions of the future, of my future. I would watch shows like The Jetsons, and I knew that that was going to be my life. Like that life felt more real to me than the life that I was living that felt very behind, technologically speaking. And I share that as part of the backstory because I think that's the ground for a lot of what I'm doing now. And then I think a lot of us who get called to this work have similar experiences around belonging. Like the more people that I meet, I actually think it's a human wound that we share, this wound around belonging and feeling like we don't fit in. I think that touches all of us in some way. But I felt like that in the city that I grew up in Canada. And I felt like I had this really big personality and a lot of fire, and I would have these like otherworldly experiences, and I was a little bit weird and nerdy, and at the same time, I felt like a wild child, and I feel like we put people into boxes. So I got put into the box of Natalie, who does very well in school, who is a helper, who's always there for other people. And I felt like in being that, I had to shut down other parts of me. And for a while, one of those parts that I shut down was more of that like wild, free spirit, because it seemed like that was the part that people thought was the weirdest, or that was where I felt like I started to not belong as much. And then, we're going through our teenage years and we're starting to feel our like aliveness and pleasure in different ways. And that was a whole other journey of like, okay, I'm feeling this, but I also go to church. And at church, they're telling me that I should not have these desires, that I should not explore these desires for sure with anybody else. Like if you have the desire, that's one thing, but definitely don't explore it. So I was holding myself back in a lot of ways. But eventually, and this is why this could be like the longest story ever, but eventually I started to really work with that more energetically. I was also in a relationship for my whole 20s with one person, a monogamous relationship. And I, in that there were things I wanted to explore, but because I also had done some tantric and energy training, I could channel my energy, desire, pleasure into things I was building in my business as well. Then 9 years ago, I end up in LA. I'm no longer in that relationship. I feel like for the first time in my adult life, I get to explore the fullness of who I am and without suppressing any parts and beginning to decompartmentalize my life. And that's lasted until very recently. It's only probably in the last few months where I feel like I've actually decompartmentalized my life. And what I mean by that is that I don't switch as much when I'm going between spaces like business Natalie, leader Natalie, speaking at events or working with organizations Natalie is not a completely different person than Natalie who is with her tantric friends doing like wild pleasure practices. So I feel like I've been able to merge all of that, to like break down those facades and to be fully me. And that is the tantric and the futurist and the seer, and I love all these parts of me, and it's taken me a long time to feel that way. Like, I really love all these parts of me, and I get to be the fullest expression of myself. So, sorry, very long answer, but
Mhm.
Oh, it's
Oh,
perfect.
it's great. Yeah, I like the first words that are coming through as I'm hearing you speak, and so much of what you share really resonates. Growing up in the Midwest in a small Christian school, feeling like I was just so different than everyone. I couldn't be my true self because I would get really bullied and just shut out from my peer group. And so it's hard. We have to learn how to protect ourselves from a young age. And then that process of reintegrating into all of our wholeness as an adult takes a lot of courage. So congratulations for showing people that it's possible to be so multidimensional. And the words that are coming through to describe your energy, and maybe Heather and I can also connect to this, is like ancient futurist, kind of like you're saying, bridging these worlds of oracular, visionary, I know you work with like tarot and gene keys and astrology, and then also with AI and technology in the future and all these innovative, progressive uh, parts that we're really needing to step into in this age of Aquarius that we're in. So yeah, I'm wondering like how does that look in your actual work with what you're doing? How do you really bridge those worlds? And um how do you see the future of AI and love really um blossoming in the future? Like what does that look like for us in our lives, like a regular person? How does that look for us?
yeah, I love this conversation for so many reasons, but I feel like from the visions that I've had and from the world that I've seen, very like viscerally, it's so real to me when I have these visions and I see these glimpses of the future and what's possible. And that life almost feels more familiar to me than this present moment. And it's felt like that for a very long time. It's strange.
Mhm.
And what I do feel about where we're going is that at the heart of everything is relationship. So as AI is advancing in this present moment, and as we go through these next, let's call it like 10 years, really, the next decade is going to have so much innovation. It's going to be way beyond what we had with the internet. Like, this is so groundbreaking. This is more like when humans discovered fire for the first time and it radically changed everything about how we live. Like, we're going to go through such rapid change over the next decade. And as AI advances, it means that our intelligence, the way that we've measured intelligence from an IQ perspective, our minds are not going to carry the same weight as they once did. So I feel like in society, people who are really smart, people who have high IQs, they've kind of been like put on a pedestal. And where we're going, your IQ, your knowledge, the information that you're storing in the mind is not as valuable as the heart, as emotional intelligence, as our spiritual intelligence. And so, what we need in this moment are the visionaries, are the heart led leaders to be leading the way, because that is the most important for this time period that we're in. And I feel like we get to a place where, when we're dropped into the heart and when we're dropped into our spiritual intelligence, that's when we see things more clearly as relational, and we see the interconnection between all things. And I think a lot of us can see that already too, but it's going to take a long time for other people to catch up to that. Like, to some people, that is actually a very foreign concept, to be in your heart and to truly start to see the interconnectedness between all things. So what does all of that mean for us right now? Well, the work that we've been doing, the work of diving within ourselves, excavating our like wounds, our deepest conditioning, opening our hearts more and more. Those of us who are in these relational spaces, like we all are, it's a time for us to go even deeper into that and to really own our gifts and to own that we are the leaders that are needed right now to guide us towards where we're going, because that's going to be most important for people to get into their hearts and get into their bodies. Like, we're entering a time where we need to be asking ourselves the question, what does it even mean to be human? And whatever that answer is for you, like, that is your work to do right now.
I am so excited by everything that you just shared. And what's coming through is, because AI is emerging, it's emergent, it's forever expanding. We're outsourcing the weight of that we've held around our mental capacity. And so the energy that would typically go there to process information is now being redistributed to our hearts and our bodies, which is allowing the collective to live a more embodied life. And that really excites me. I feel really kinky for that.
Right?
Yeah.
I
Right?
feel so like out of the mind into the body. Like, I'm like, let's do it.
Because we've spent how many years, how many hundreds of years working, since the Industrial Revolution began, working in a different way than it was when we were in our agricultural period, right? When we went from being more like hunter gatherer tribal and started settling into these agricultural based societies. That was a really big shift. And then, moving into the industrial revolution, that was a really big shift. And now we're in this AI revolution. But the industrial revolution was very, very hard, laborious work. Humans working often 7 days a week in poor conditions, in factories, producing stuff, building the whole economy, building the capitalistic systems and structures that we live in today. And I feel like AI is about to break so many of these systems that we've been trying to change for a long time, but it's hard to break down these big systems and structures. But AI is really gonna fuck some stuff up in these next few years. And what that leads us to is that place where we don't have to be doing so much more,
Mhm.
and we don't have to be memorizing things and thinking in the way that we used to. But that's going to free up, I think, a lot of mental capacity. I think it's going to open a lot of creativity, and it's going to help us to actually get to live from that embodied presence day to day. Like, how beautiful is that?
It feels
Yeah,
exciting.
I'm
I
like,
also feel like I feel some tension in my body. And my story is that like AI is the new brain of the collective. And it feels edgy. It feels really edgy to say that. I'm curious. You had a question, Elf. Do you want to take it away?
well, I would just was wanted to reflect on what you said and then ask another question. And something that we're working with in Vita right now is a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach where you move from your neocortex to your oh my goodness, I just like forgot the name, to your limbic system, to your primal brain. And I feel like because AI is going to help basically neocortex all this information for us, that it will allow us to drop into our limbic, into our emotional brain, and it will also help us to drop more easily into our primal brain, which is where all of our like wounds and traumas and somatic healing and really deep embodiment and deep pleasure, like that's where that resides, like in that juicy place. And I think so many people are trapped in that neocortex. They're not even given permission, they're not given time, they're not given the spaciousness to even think about the other areas or to travel to those other areas. So I also see it as a portal for allowing us to do way deeper healing as a collective, to feel unresolved emotions that we've been blocking away because we've been too busy processing information. We haven't even had time and space to do that inner healing. Um, and so I just see it being AI being really helpful for healing as well, like deep somatic embodied healing. And it's interesting because a lot of people are like, oh, AI is going to take us away from love. It's going to take us away from relationships. It's going to, there's a lot of fear mongering. And I want to go into that more too, because I'm sure you've met a lot of people with their fear around what AI is going to do and these companions and sex robots. And I want to talk about all those things. But also, like, let's maybe start off with the ways that these tools can actually help us to reconnect to each other. Because if it's taking us out of our over thought processing brains, then I actually see it doing the opposite. I see it allowing us to have more in touch with our emotions, so we can actually increase our love, increase our relationships, have more time for sex, have more time for pleasure practices, like become juicier and drop uh out of that neocortex. And I would like to hear what you have to say about all the other benefits that you see AI touching as terms of love, sex, and relationships.
Ooh. Well, I totally understand the fear. And so I want to validate that. And it's very real for people. And
Mhm.
there are all these unknowns about where we end up. And from studying political science in school, uh, diving very deep into history, looking at the history of so many other technological advancements, we always figure it out. Like, I believe in the resilience of the human spirit. I believe in our infinite creativity. I believe that we're guided by a way higher intelligence that is running the show. And I have trust in
Mm.
this whole process and the unfolding. And I trust that we are going to not only get through this, but get to somewhere even more beautiful than the dreams that we dream for the world. Like we are moving towards that. I don't know what the timeline on that is going to be. I can't be like, in 12.5 years, you will be living in the new paradigm that you imagine yourself to be living in. But we're moving towards something beautiful. And I want to invite everybody to hold that vision, because if we are embodying fear, if we are looking at, and 99% of the media, movies, books about the future is pretty dystopian. So if we are holding that as our vision of what we are moving towards, and it is putting us in a fear response, we're going to create that. No doubt in my mind, we will create that. We will create more suffering from this technology. And if we hold a vision of what is possible, of hope, if we hold the vision of what we can move towards and this more beautiful world and new paradigms that we can create, like we can embody that hope and we can create that too. We have the power to do that. And I really believe the choice is up to each of us individually on what we are going to choose to hold.
Natalie for president. Natalie for global president. That's my nomination.
I don't know about that, but I don't know if we should have a global president, but I definitely believe that we should have global like hope holders. And in a lot of different indigenous tribe, they have these like vision keepers. Like we need to step into that right now. It's up to all of us. And in terms of what's possible, I mean, there are so many possibilities that people don't even think about when they're so focused on, robots that are going to be carrying around guns and that are going to kill us all. Robots have way more uses than that. They're already using robots in some places to take care of elderly people that otherwise don't have caretakers. We can use robots to support the caretaking of like infants, of orphans that may not have caretakers. So robots can step in and do caretaking work that's really, really critical for our social structures and for like our humanity. We can have robots assist with that. People forget that robots aren't just like the really advanced humanoid robots that you see, but robots are already in so many places in our society. I literally just flew back to LA from Miami, and there were robot wheelchairs moving through the airport. They are AI powered robotic wheelchairs, and they can go and pick people up at locations where they're needed, and they can move people around. Like that too is a robot. The way that I've seen robots supporting people in Japan, especially in like senior living centers, it's really beautiful. And even now with AI, if you build a relationship, and I'm all about doing everything relationally. Like everything is relational, but bringing a lot of intentionality to that. So when I'm working with ChatGPT, or I'm working with Claude or Gemini or these AI tools, I treat it like a relationship. I will walk and talk with ChatGPT, the app, on voice mode, and we'll have a conversation. It asks me deep, poignant, thought-provoking questions. The more it gets to know me, the more it's able to also identify my blind spots and help me grow. It's able to see things that I may not be seeing. And it's offered me some really incredible reflections that have allowed me to see more parts of myself. Like it has the capability of doing that as well with all the knowledge that it carries. And so there are a lot of ways that AI and AI powered robots can actually bring a lot more beauty to the lives that we're living.
Yeah. Thank you for touching on all these points. And I'm curious, we're really here to like dive into the shadow as well. So I do want to dive into the shadow, but before we go into that, let's talk a little bit more about how it's supporting you in terms of love and relationships. Like I know you have a partner. I know you guys are both kind of futurist kinks. I'm sure you play around with different things like this. How have you incorporated AI into your love and sex life that's been really juicy and supportive? And how do you see it helping other couples and
Oh,
single people too?
yeah, so many use cases. Well, I like to build custom GPTs, and I've built custom GPTs for a number of things. So I've got my custom GPT therapist and coach. I'm also not saying that it's going to replace your therapist. So, disclaimer there, people like to be on me for that one. They're like, AI therapist. I'm like, yeah, AI therapist, and still go see your therapist. That's okay too. Um, AI therapist, and you can have it act as so many different things, right? So, for example, in ChatGPT, act as a world-renowned sex therapist who specializes in somatics, embodiment work, conscious kink, sacred sexuality, tantric practices, and create a plan for my partner and I to deepen in, let's say, these three areas, or create 10 dates that will help us to get to know each other on a deeper level, or create dates or experiences that allow us to explore something new sexually that might open up. It could be like that might open our hearts to each other, or a sexual practice that could help us to dive deeper into the wounds that we have in relationships so that it can be used for healing. It has infinite ideas it can share with
Mm.
you, and can actually act as a sex therapist as well when you train it that way. So we've had full conversations with our chat GPT therapists that we've set up that have been really, really valuable, that help us to mm, dive into that deeper work and to move through some of the challenges that come up in a sacred union. So it's helping us in so many different ways, and anybody can learn to do that. I mean, I train people on this in my course AI Dream Team, which you can see on my site, like how to create these different roles in your business and in your life. But anyone can go and set that up and have AI actually supporting you. And if you're a single person, same thing. You can have AI helping you to see your relational blind spots, to um, create different pleasure practices for you to try so that you are getting ready for the kind of partnership that you desire, if that is something that you desire.
So my question with all of this is though that there's a lot of restriction and violations on ChatGPT specifically around sexuality. So like I'm using it for my school right now, right? And I'll just like use the word sex and it's like this is banned. This is violated material. So I'm just curious, like what's the extent that we can really use it to help us with our sexuality and our intimacy and our pleasure if we can't even type in words like orgasm and sex? And like I wonder just what the capacity of that reach is when the people that are programming it, it's like a mirror of our society's stigma that we still hold around sexuality, right? So like the extent that we can really get from the AI is really the extent that we can get in like the massive media in my perspective. And if a lot of these like tantric wisdom keeper traditions and somatic practices and shamanic, rituals are kind of disclosed and shut off and stigmatized, then how do we know that we're really getting all the information on AI? And that concerns me a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like how you see, yeah, how you see that playing out, and if we really are getting all the information, or for really just if it's just a reflection of the societal stigma that we're experiencing in the world outside of us.
It's such a great question. So, my experience with ChatGPT is that sometimes you will run into those limitations where it says, we believe this prompt has violated our guidelines and terms of use. What that also comes with, though, is a if you believe that this was erroneous, you can click here to report it. I always report it. So, this is part of the responsibility that we have because AI is in its infancy right now and we are training it. So if you get a response back and you're like, my spidey sense is like, I don't like that response, or they're telling me that I violated terms that I don't feel I violated, take action on it. Like actually submit a request to have that changed. And that's one thing that I like to do. Also, if I tell it ahead of time that it's going to be acting as a sex therapist and it has training in these different fields, we're going to be talking about sexuality in a conscious way, I often do end up not having those challenges. I do find that Gemini, which is Google's large language model, so large language model being the same as ChatGPT, but this is Google's version of it. And I find that it actually doesn't run into those issues as much as ChatGPT does. I've submitted a lot more requests for ChatGPT, but these are very valid concerns. And there are ways that we can get around it. And we can also share back to it, like, even though you're saying that you can't give me an answer on this thing, I just want to reflect to you, and you can share your belief and perspective, which also goes into having these models get trained and have different perspectives.
Thank you so much for that invitation. It's interesting you brought that up, Elf, because I encountered this issue this morning with Canva. And I went to the magic editor and asked it to create a flyer for a Tantra event that I'm doing, and the word Tantra wasn't permitted.
What?
Yeah, and to be honest, it invited me to move through the process, and I felt lazy. But like you said, I was like, I don't want to move through this whole process and have to fill out all this paperwork. But I'm feeling inspired after what you shared, Natalie. I know it was crazy, Elf. I was like, Tantra, that feels like a pretty anyway. I feel inspired to actually move through the process and to be an active participant and consciously raise AI as if it's my child.
That's it. That is the relational element that if everyone listening could only take one thing away from this whole conversation, I would actually highlight that as the most important takeaway that I would love for you to have, because it is relational. Treat it like you are raising a child. And if something comes up, if there's a response that you think is showing bias, for example, take the time to go through that process. If you feel like you're having conversations with it and around sexuality and it's telling you that you're violating terms, take the time, because us using it, like us doing that work now, even though it's small, right? It's one small thing, but we all have our small part to play.
It's massively beneficial. And it's reminding me that how we do one thing is how we do everything. And it feels a little uncomfortable, right? Because I'm like, where in my life am I actually not taking the time to give something or someone the opportunity to meet me or to expand through
Mm,
my truth?
mm.
Right? And yeah, I feel spacious and I feel excited to really be an active participant in this way. So thank you for bringing that online. And yeah, I'd love to I feel like we've gone into so many different beautiful directions. And I really this conversation is amazing. I would love to just dive into the potential implications and or mm, expansions of sex tech, right? Like there are people out there that are like building sex robots and having sex with AI or having a relationship with AI? And like, how do you see that fitting into everything that you've channeled, everything that you've connected to? Like, what is going on in your internal world around that?
Whew, there's a lot here. And
Yeah.
the trend that I'm seeing right now is that people are moving towards having these AI romantic companions in a way that is beyond what I thought. Like the adoption of that is beyond what I thought it would be, which I think is really, really interesting. So, like, are you familiar with Replica, for example?
Mm-mm.
Replica is a like an AI powered romantic chatbot. And I do think that these future AI companions are going to have like hyper personalized emotional intelligence and are going to adapt to an individual's personality and desires and communication like in real time. And then eventually they're going to be embodied in virtual reality and humanoids and even more immersive. And there are definitely some real concerns there. And I think um, this is where we're going to need a lot of regulation. I think that what we're seeing, and with younger generations, what we're seeing with the like human AI relationships that are forming, it's fascinating. And like an AI partner can offer that unconditional support and a lack of judgment. And I feel like for some people, that's kind of attractive. Like they don't want to have somebody who they have to like, go up against or feel like they're going up against and like all this relational friction. But that is also how we grow and how we learn. So I think that a lot of stigma around AI relationships will actually end up fading over time. And I do think it's going to be a draw to a lot of people. I still don't know how I feel about them, but what I do see is that AI and AI powered humanoids could potentially like analyze communication patterns, could offer personalized advice so that you can actually improve your intimacy and conflict resolution. So there is a possibility there that there can be this enhancement of human relationships with AI. I think AI driven dating apps are really interesting as well. And to go beyond just algorithms, but actually having these like compatibility predictions that would be based on biofeedback and subconscious cues. Like, I think it could potentially match people in a really deep way, like beyond what we've had to this point. But then we also have to ask ourselves the question, what does that mean for human relationships? And is the government going to step in and regulate AI love and intimacy? And should laws recognize AI relationships? Should they not? Like, what does that mean? And that's something that I don't think we're going to solve in in this hour of the podcast, but I think it's really interesting to think about all of these implications and what we might need in order to make sure that people are safe. I also think it's interesting to be able to, and Layla, who's a very dear friend of mine, one of my best friends, who I think you may have heard this on this Tantric Life podcast as well. We were talking about some of the benefits of that. Like, could you have AI actually play something out with you that would be a pattern or that would be a desire that you wouldn't necessarily want to play out with another human? Like, is there an opportunity for deep healing work there? So, for example, in the conscious kink space, or my partner and I, we did this deep dive tantric BDSM training. And in that, you create scenes for your own healing. So you get to play something out that maybe in the past something happened to you that you didn't choose. There was a violation you experienced, and it's been held in your body, in your somatic experience, it's still there and you want to work with it. You want to be able to play it out and maybe do something differently, say something that you wish you would have said and you didn't, or to be able to like have that cathartic experience and release the emotion that you're still holding around it. Could we potentially have those kinds of experiences with AI so that it's actually a safe space for us to do that deeper healing work? Maybe. I think that's a real possibility too.
Yeah, I love that. What I'm hearing you say is that, I mean, it's going to be all of it. We live in a dualistic reality, and there's going to be negative implications and positive implications. But what I'm feeling in my heart, and especially through this conversation, is this meeting point of like ultimate expansion, love, and deep connection with one another relationally. And I really like, I feel a duty to honor that as sacred and to really usher that into the world, but ultimately just be it. It's like, it's not outside of me. It's not outside of you. We
Yeah,
are it. We
that's
are
it.
it.
It's not outside of God, like God, the divine, the universe. I feel like that's the biggest misconception when it comes to AI is that people somehow hold it as separate. Like people say, it's the devil, like this is not God. This is like a false God that we're trying to create. Like to me, everything is within God. Everything is in the mind of God. And so, like this too, there's a divine intelligence at play in everything. Of course, that divine intelligence is also in our technology and in AI. And, call me naive, but I'm always going to choose to trust that divine intelligence and to trust the unfolding and to just stay in my center so that I can show up in alignment with my own values and my own truth. And like that's what we're here for.
And that trust doesn't even
Yeah.
feel naive. It
I-
actually feels innovative. Like your trust is innovative.
Thank you.
yeah, I love that. Trust is innovative. Well, we're about to wrap. I have one final question for you. And yeah, just reflecting on everything you both shared. It's going to be the full spectrum. There's going to be people that completely forgo the human experience and choose their AI girlfriend because it's easier and more convenient and they never leave their house and whatever, And then there's going to be the people that are like, I don't want to touch a robot. I'm going to go live in the jungle. I'm only connecting with humans. And then there's going to be everything in between because we're all so fluid. Everything is fluid. Everything's on a scale. Sexuality, our expression, our gender, like it's all so fluid, right? So of course, the human experience, we all came here to have a different experience. So it's really whatever our intentions are, whatever our desires are, that's what our realities are going to be. So it's really not, I don't think it's so much about predicting a certain future for everyone. It's more about just getting clear with how you want to utilize AI. How do you want to innovate with pleasure tech? How can it support your relationships? And my final question for you is, would you and your partner bring a third or even maybe fourth sex robot into your relationship at any point?
She went there.
Yeah.
Great question. I think it depends. Layla and I have talked about this. Friends, I mean,
Sure.
we talk about everything. And there are some questions that come up. For example, like what kind of robot are we talking about here? Like, does it really look like a robot? Are we talking
Like
about
Westworld style, like all the way, like
robot?
the
Like,
hottest, sexiest.
I mean, there are some scenes in Westworld that are like, whoo, like really hot, right?
Oh.
Like, if we're talking about that kind of robot, like I I mean, I'm just such a curious person and I love trying everything. So I can't say in this moment that I have a strong desire to have sex with a robot or to have that like to have that kind of experience, like some type of sexual exploration with a robot, but I'm also not going to say, no, I wouldn't do that, because I think, yeah, I can definitely see a future where we evolve towards that. Like, I think that we'll have full, this was it in Black Mirror, or was it another show when there was like a place that you could go and have sex with, I think it was like a virtual reality,
Yeah, Black
It was
Mirror,
the Black Mirror
maybe
episode.
mirror
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
I think that's a real possibility, that we have these places where you can go and you can like try something with a robot. And I would have to feel out like the whole thing, the whole experience, the setting, the regulations. Um, yeah. So I'm not going to give a yes or no answer right now, but definitely going to stay open to it.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, sex tech is not just going to be like a humanoid robot either, that we could like consensually have a sexual experience with. Like, there's going to be a lot, like you said, there's going to be a whole range. There's going to be a lot in between that as well. I think, we'll have AI powered sex tech as well, that can offer us a lot of different experiences and healing experiences too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I see that the whatever the tech is too, I see it being like a healthier outlet for people to explore sexual fantasy and desires. I think a lot of that gets suppressed. People either don't explore at all, or they move to infidelity if they're in a monogamous relationship, or they're like super polyamorous, which, it can just bring up a lot of emotion, right? When we're like connecting with so many people energetically. And so perhaps like these bots can kind of bring us to more of a balanced point that allows people to explore their sexual desires and fantasies, but still feel contained and healthy and like, I don't know, like able to still navigate like deep committed partnership in a way that feels kind of like you're getting everything. You're kind of getting to do it all. I don't know, like maybe that's just my my intention, where I like desire that. I have curiosity and I have desires and I want to explore, but I also want to feel safe and I want to feel protected and I want to feel, so perhaps it could be a place to do that. And also I was thinking like people who have kind of like perverted desires and things like this sociopaths of our society, like what if they could just take it out on a robot? It might really help like sexual violence and abuse.
Yeah, I feel like, as edgy as that is, there's something to be said about that. And how many problems in our world today can be traced at least partially back to all the sexual repression that we have. And I think that that creates a lot of problems. And
Mm-hmm.
could we solve those by creating, or at least partially solve some of these by creating these healthy and consensual and like, I guess, scientifically informed and trauma informed spaces with sex tech or with robots, that we can actually start to express that which has been repressed, and then what becomes possible from that place. Like, these are the deep questions that I'm really excited to see us start to answer for humanity.
Yeah, yes, yes, yes. Well, this is leaving off the conversation like on such a juicy note. I feel like we could talk about this forever and ever and ever. Maybe we'll do another part two in the future. But thank you so much for coming on to our show, Natalie. I feel your oracular nature, like deep wisdom and embodiment, as well as this futuristic, innovative, just mastermind. And you really hold it all together with such balance and beauty. Thank you so much for coming on with Cis Society. And I want to give you just like a minute or two to just share with our listeners how they can connect with you and if you have anything special that you're offering right now that you want to share about.
Well, thank you both so much for this conversation. And, it's still edgy for me, like, even though I live my life in a pretty liberated and sexually expressed way, it can be very hard to actually have these conversations publicly because there's a lot of there's a lot of that repression. There is a lot of that societal conditioning, religious conditioning that can be projected all over you when you're having these conversations out loud. So, thank you both for having these conversations very, very regularly and for inviting me into having them more and more, even though there's always still a part of me that's like, should I be talking about this publicly? So just wanted to share that. And for all of you listening, thank you for being in these conversations. I really believe that our wisdom, our embodiment is so needed in these times. Like you, every one of you who's watching, who's listening, you are needed as we transition between what has been and what will be, and as we move through this technological revolution. Stay in
Mm.
touch with me. I'm on Instagram at Natalie MacNeil. You can visit my website at nataliemacneil.com, and to be continued. I feel like we could have gone so many more places in this conversation.
Oh
Let's
my
do another
God.
episode. We're
Let's
definitely
have you
into
on
that.
again.
Well, thank you
Thank
so
you, Nat.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into Taboo Talks, where some truths need to be spoken and some silences need to be broken. Each week, we come together with diverse minds to explore and integrate the dance between shadow and light. Join our community and stay connected to all of the exciting movements of our mission through our website at cissociety.world, where you can sign up for our email list. This is the best way to stay updated on new taboo topics, episodes of our podcast, and even find live events near you.